Hello, I'm Tony Benedict. I'm president of the Association of Business Process Management Professionals, and I'm going to talk about value creation in mergers and acquisitions, primarily acquisition integration. I'm going to kind of go through this in about 30 minutes. There's a lot of material, so I'll try to really highlight the key points. I'll talk about some trends, the deal types, what really matters in pre-close planning and integration planning, what is a realistic timeline, and then really I'll focus on some lessons learned across multiple industries. So M&A is on the rise, especially in certain industries. Healthcare in particular, technology and business services are super hot right now. Middle market, any industry, and in particular, middle market industrials, HVAC, stuff like that. Despite the high rate of mergers and acquisitions, believe it or not, there is still a high failure rate. The median is about 70%. I've seen anywhere from 50 to 90% with a median of about 70. 70% will fail within 2 years, and it really occurs during post-integration. So after the deals close, the acquirer is starting to integrate the target company. Lots of reasons for failure. One of the big ones is culture mismatch. Culture can destroy a company. You've heard the comment, culture eats strategy for breakfast. Well, it can also ruin a merger. Another reason is you didn't know what you didn't know. You found something out after you closed the deal. Many times financial synergies don't materialize. They look good on paper, but the reality was a lot different. And you did it for the wrong reasons, and it made it high risk. Somebody's ego, it was just a bad idea, or it sounded good. A 100-day plan is only the start. It is not the answer to improving your success rate, okay? This is what a typical integration playbook or M&A playbook looks like. There's deal development, due diligence, closing, and integration. I'm going to focus on closing, which is what I'll call pre-closing planning, and then integration, which is post-acquisition integration. But there are a lot of different deal types. So when you do a deal, there's a deal team. They usually have an investment thesis. Across the top, you see the 3 columns. There's typical what they call tuck-ins. This is you're buying a company that's similar to you. You just want to get bigger and consolidate a geography or a region. You want to grow economies of scale, extend your sales reach. Integration in terms of the amount is very high for these types of deals. It's a full integration. It's every functional area. Some of them are just new businesses where you want to get into a new business in an existing geography where you operate. So it's kind of more of a combination. These can be, in terms of level of integration, moderate to high. Typically, you do what they call shared services, finance, HR, et cetera, in the back office. The key value drivers are cross-selling, cultural transfer of skills, whatever, new value proposition. And then you have what's called the new geography. This is maybe diversification or conglomerate type of a situation where you're acquiring R&D or technology. You're trying to preserve sort of the cash cow. It gets you into a new geography with a higher growth potential. It's a new value proposition. Typically you let the company run on its own like it was before, so level of integration is low to moderate. These can also fail, though, for the reasons mentioned earlier. Now, the M&A playbook is not necessarily linear, but it tends to kind of project that way. Again, a lot of things are done in parallel. Due diligence is done with pre-closing planning, that sort of thing. Once you get past due diligence, which tends to be all the financial and the legal stuff, now you're in post-diligence, pre-close planning. What's the final price you're going to pay? What's the final agreement look like? You're really starting your transition planning. What is the level of integration here? What are key processes for your integration plan? You should start a cultural assessment at this point. Most companies do not do this, okay? They do not do it. I would say anywhere from 10 to 20% will do a cultural assessment at this stage, or they'll do it in integration, but the earlier the better. You want to know as much as you can about the culture. Sometimes they'll, if it's private equity, they'll send an operating partner in and they'll try to do their own assessment. I would recommend a formal assessment. You should select your commercial integration lead. I'll spend some time on this. Identify your functional team leads for HR, supply chain, marketing, finance, etc. And then develop your communication strategy and plan. And I'll get into this as well. This is an integration complexity grid. This is what I would recommend you do, again, in pre-close planning. There's characteristics of complexity. You could add your own here, but there's the size of the transaction. So there's a dollar amount, dollar value, purchase price. There's employee size. If it's a company or a business unit, there's a location in terms of distance from your corporate office. There's also how many locations are you talking about? As well as, are there international locations? And you can see the low versus high, and you're scoring up between 1 and 5, 5 being high. There's a level of cost reduction. You could do a percent of sales. You could look at percent of SG&A, whatever. Percent of sales tends to be the most common. What's the type of acquisition? Is it just a product add-on? Is it a standalone where you're gonna just totally tuck in the company? Or is it I've heard this a lot, merger of equals, which I won't get into the downsides of that, but that's more unicorns and rainbows than it is reality. And then your talent to retain. If there's few replicable skills versus many critical skills, technology expertise, you'll see a lot of this in technology and business services or high-tech manufacturing, semiconductor, communications, aerospace, defense, that sort of thing. What's the enthusiasm? Is it an agreeable acquisition, or is it a hostile takeover? And then level of process and system sophistication. So let's say a high-tech manufacturer like semiconductor, for example, would have a very high degree of process and system sophistication compared to, say, making nuts and bolts, for example. And then market space. Is it core to your business, or are you stepping out of your core and adding something else, adding a new market? And then cultural compatibility. If it's high, great. If it's low, not very good, okay? So when you get through this, obviously the higher the score, the higher the complexity. This is very, very critical, and a lot of decisions are made from each category, more than you can imagine. And a lot of the decisions related to complexity tend to be ignored or assumed that it'll take care of itself, which is another reason for high failure rates. Again, pre-close planning, you want to announce your commercial integration lead and your team members. Begin your pre-close checklist and determine your 100-day plan. Again, if you've done a culture assessment, you should do talent assessment. Day one plan. You want to validate the metrics, and I'll talk about these, and develop a value capture plan. What I am going to say with value creation in post-acquisition integration is it's more about which metrics you choose and not necessarily all financial metrics, okay? Develop your communication plan, get it approved, look at what workshops need to be developed and what training needs to be deployed. What's your end game? And look at transitioning organizations and optimizing integration and your process mapping and dependencies, okay? You should already know your level of integration at this point. These are your functional work streams: HR operations, supply chain, pricing, sales and marketing, IT, finance, back office, marketing. You can see the degree of integration and the degree of risk, okay? For HR, the most important thing is getting the right talent in the right positions. For operations, you want it integrated and optimized for producing cash flow. So this is, what is your business model? How do you produce cash? That is the most critical thing. Supply chain, again, integrated and optimized for working capital and margin improvement, and customer order throughput. 3 key metrics. So the cash flow, working capital, margin improvement, customer order throughput, 4 really good metrics for post-acquisition integration. Pricing, obviously, optimized for margin. Sales, optimized for cross-selling. IT is integrate to optimize your value streams, procure to pay, order to cash, and then longer term, reduce your tech debt. Finance back office is set up and leverage as shared services to reduce SG&A. Pretty simple. And marketing is one brand mindset where it makes the most sense, or differentiate where it can maximize margin. Some priority considerations. These are the things that you should decide prior to day one. So, already talked about the cultural assessment. You definitely want to assess current talent. And if people hear that they're being bought out, you will have attrition early. So if you have shortages, you need to know where they are and the skills and competencies that you're going to need for your organizational future state, okay? More importantly, you need to know what you need to run the business right now. If you lose a lot of people, you're going to have a heck of a time running the business right now. Again, it does happen. I've seen it happen. For the commercial lead, ideally a C-suite, Chief Operating Officer, SVP Operations, they should be your commercial lead for all of your integration PMO, and they should be accountable along with some other senior execs for all your value metrics. And again, I put a couple here. I put talent retention, cultural health, are some other good ones. If you do your skills and competency assessments early, the payoff is huge, huge. Second, processes. Understand where your problems are first. then align those problems to whatever those processes are. So order to cash, procure to pay, if it's a manufacturer, forecast to production, production to distribution, order fulfillment, etc. And then understand your data and your gaps in information across your value streams and the two companies to look at what are the common themes that are popping up. For your IT systems, clearly you want to understand technology debt. If you have two different ERP vendors, huge technology debt. But more importantly, what's the IT department's approach to harmonize your systems prior to acquisition and post-acquisition? So is there a plan? What is the plan? What's the timing of the plan? Does it close gaps in data and process misalignment? What are the quick wins? And then I've mentioned this again, culture. Your cultural assessment will give you a general cultural climate. You'll get a sense of the urgency for integrating the acquired company. Start with your C-suites, work your way down, understand experience, approach, flexibility to integrating the companies. Go down to director levels and even frontline staff, depending on their proximity to customers and your supply base, okay? Very, very, very important. For integration, now you're in integration, you're gonna start your day one. You'll conduct integration workshops, you're gonna do the things we just talked about, develop your action plans by functional areas, and whatever. I don't like the word synergy as much, but think of your metrics and your value. Confirm your metric targets and align them with the teams or the functional areas. Begin your weekly functional integration meetings. More importantly, identify cross-functional dependencies. You want to make sure your functional work streams are also integrated. And then have your oversight meeting with status dashboards. Your communication plan should be fully activated, and your end state definition with initial metric targets and timing. This is just an integration governance matrix, won't spend a lot of time on it, but you can see it starts at senior exec level, has the committee, the commercial lead, you know, going down to the integration manager, your functional leads, et cetera. And it's really planning, approving, and consulting. It's almost like a racing matrix, okay? And your escalation path on who has final authority for decisions. Again, you'll continue to do everything that you've already done. What you want to do is have a reporting process and frequency. So weekly, it's the functional team leads, finance, accounting, project managers, and your business segment VP is FYI, unless high integration complexity, they should go to weeklies. That's my recommendation. There's a monthly cadence, which is standard, and this is escalation paths, and then board updates. Really, I would send a board update monthly with a quarterly report out. Your senior commercial executive should be monitoring integration of those functional work streams. Monthly for sure, weekly if there's high integration complexity, okay? This is an integration timeline. You know, when you talk about a full M&A, from, let's say, deal thesis all the way through completion of post-acquisition integration. Deal development, due diligence, usually is 6 to 10 months. If people tell you they're doing it in 3 months, they're probably skipping a lot of things. 6 months would be pretty good, but there's a lot to go through. And again, the middle market and above in terms of size usually is a 9 month, sometimes more, okay? From closing through post-acquisition integration, typically it's 12 to 24 months. If failure is going to happen, it's going to happen within that time frame. On the integration, you can basically see what it looks like. Communication starts in post due diligence, pre-close planning. Everything else is day one. Okay. Some lessons learned across multiple industries. I would say, and this is from not only my own experience, but many case studies and a lot of the published literature. Culture is the #1 cause of failure. Well, what makes up culture? People. People and behaviors define culture. So if you get people wrong, you're more than likely going to get culture wrong. And keep in mind, people do all the work. Work is made up of processes. So if you don't get people, you won't get culture, you won't get process. So your first 90 to 120 days, again, depending on the size of the company, is get the talent right. Put the right people in the right positions. You'll usually see executive level first, working on down. There may be a lot of shuffling at director levels if people don't perform. You will have attrition. The mantra here is take time to hire, don't wait to fire. On processes, and these are all the operationals of procure to pay, order to cash, hire to retire, et cetera, et cetera. Do the quick assessments on the major ones, as noted earlier. You want to try to drive process standardization for procure to pay and order to cash as quickly as you can. Change management plays a major role here. Again, that's why communication starts early. Your transition planning should start early with it. You shouldn't have more than 5 enterprise level metrics to measure. Here's some great examples: cash flow, margin, talent retention, cash to cash cycle for your payables, customer order fulfillment. If you monitor these metrics and improve them, everything else will fall into place. So if you're going to close down factories or do any of that, that's a cost reduction metric, which tends to be one of those synergies and synergy drivers. The word of caution on that is, as soon as you start telegraphing closure of facilities, you're going to get talent attrition. And not in those facilities, but you're going to get talent attrition in director level and above, more so director level. So focus on the metrics that matter at the enterprise level. Yes, you will close distribution centers or sales offices or consolidate, but you have to have a good plan to transition people so that they know where they're going to end up. That's the most important thing. As long as people know where they're going to end up, they'll stick around. On your IT systems, typically this is 6 to 12 months. It's much longer if you have a lot of technology debt. If you have 2 ERP systems or 3 ERP systems, it's a lot longer, a lot longer. Focus on what you can do to optimize operations quickly without breaking anything. Then you want to plan out technology consolidations and standardizations and invest in accelerating your timelines where you can, because those savings will accrue over the longer term. But this is one of those slow-moving boats across the lake, if you will. You can't do it fast. It just doesn't happen that way. And then culture, you can do the right things early on and really start building good foundations by 6 months, but you will have to constantly stay focused on building a strong culture post-acquisition. So you'll have a culture clash from day one within higher and subsequently lower ranks, especially if somebody's picked for a VP and somebody isn't, or director and somebody isn't, that kind of stuff. And it could lead to exodus of talent, in some cases mass exodus of talent. Senior executives down to director level appointments are critical for continuity of operations. I would try to make decisions as early as possible and have places for those people that aren't selected. So you can have continuity of operations and accelerate integration and obviously build a new integrated company culture. Thank you.